we've got Big Ten Media Days coming up this week. I'm sure in your time as a journalist, you've been to a fair share of these types of deals over the years. I guess what are you hoping to learn when you go to these things? Because at least from my standpoint, it seems mostly like a lot of fluff. But I'm curious if you go there with some sort of expectation on being able to get something out of it.
You always try to, maybe get a little something out of the experience that you wouldn't normally get, in a practice environment. You get a chance to see the head coach, and the players interact with media that aren't your own, which actually tends to be a good thing, because within the confines of local media, we have a tendency to feel like we already know everything, and so we don't ask obvious questions. And media from out of town does, because they don't know anything. And so last year we learned, that Garrett Nelson wants his coach to be happy, and some professor made fun of Adrian Martinez, and Scott Frost didn't want to be there and was kind of a pout, and we learned things that then carry over into the season. And so, you pick up on things. Sometimes you're surprised what you pick up on and what you think you'll get. But anytime you're in an environment like that, you're always going to see some interactions that you don't normally see. So it'll be interesting from that perspective. I don't go in with any specific kind of, and I shall learn this from the event, but yeah, you always come away with something, as it turns out.
Sam, what is the one crazy storyline that might happen or might just surface this week from media days? Because in regards to Nebraska, because there seems to always be Nebraska drama storyline happen at media, or I guess in the last regime there was always one.
Yeah, I don't know if there'll be any. I think it'll be fairly calm under Matt Rule. I think he'll make a strong impression. I don't think he'll piss anybody off with his comments. I think he'll probably keep it in the fairway, so to speak. I think that'll be true. None of the players have ever. The last time a player made waves was in 2014. Kenny Bell said something about not being able to pay his electric bills.
Yeah.
And players should get paid and stuff like that. And obviously, in the NIL universe that we have today, Kenny Bell would have been able to pay his electric bills.
Just a little bit.
He would have had some commercials.
He would have been
great. I mean, Kenny was awesome.
Yeah.
I like Kenny. I like him still. But I think that was the last time anything really whoa. Although last year Garrett Nelson said the stuff that he said, and as you said it, I'm like, that wasn't the best thing to talk about here. I think under Scott, the program had become very self-pity, and it wasn't a great deal or a look, and of course they could kick my rear end 6 ways to Sunday, but within the context of the team, they felt sad. It wasn't that they were angry, but it's that they felt bad. And, I thought that was kind of an odd vibe. And that clearly carried over into the season, because they played horribly in their first 4 games of the year. They went 1-3 in those games, and they played poor in all of them. And then they started, once everybody kind of got let go, then they started, getting outside of themselves a little bit and getting a little bit of confidence. But it took a while, right, to get there. So, yeah, I mean, I think there was, we'll see if there's any. I don't think there'll probably be any. Matt Rule's going back to the Big Ten. I think that's interesting. He doesn't talk about it much, but it's where he played.
Yeah.
And the boss who hired him at Temple is now the AD at Penn State. And in the offseason, I wanted to talk to Pat Kraft about Matt Rule, about what he saw in Matt Rule at Temple. And he declined the interview. And it wasn't because he doesn't like Matt Rule. I think there's just a sensitivity about there's a sensitivity there about Matt Rule's at Nebraska.
Right.
And it's not going to be about Matt Rule. Would Matt Rule go to Penn State? You know, like that. That's just not in the cards. Now, James Franklin's probably not going anywhere. I mean, I think he's probably sticking around Penn State. I think the job that he's always been rumored to leave for was USC.
Yeah.
I think he's going to leave for that job because the guy in the job's not going anywhere.
No.
And so, but there's a little bit of whatever around that. And Rule has always been really, you know, he's smart about it. Like he's not going to sit there and talk about, you know, his time at Penn State and he didn't spend a ton of time there, but you know, he kind of grew up in the city for a couple of days, you know, a couple of years as a teenager. So he's real familiar with the program, and you know, we'll ask him about it. But we'll, you know, I don't really know what'll come of that, but that might be a question that comes up.
We're talking with Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, you know, you mentioned that Kenny Bell story, and it kind of just got me thinking. That wasn't, I get it's, you know, 9 years ago now, but that wasn't that long ago. And in the world of NIL, which we've been in for the last couple of years, it at least in my mind, I kind of have this tendency to forget that it hasn't always been this way. Do you ever just kind of sit there and think, like, does it take you a minute to remember, like, oh man, college sports was really, really different not that long ago?
You know, a little bit. I think it's in some ways it's very different, and in some ways it's not. Like, I think the players still kind of relate to each other and to their coaches in very similar ways. You know, yeah, there's a little bit more money involved, but you know, the old, oh, the money's going to change them. Yeah, it really hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there's probably somebody out there in college football who makes so much money that it does change them. And I don't really know exactly how all the dynamics work financially. I don't know that people are making as much money as people say they are, but you know, things have changed, but also in some ways they're not different. You know what's really changed? And Nebraska football's not very good, and that's what's changed. Like, you go back in 2014 when Kenny was there, and Nebraska was a contender in the West. Nobody thought they were going to the college football playoff in year one. That was year one of the college football playoff. Nobody thought that. But I think a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, I mean, this team could play for the Big Ten title. And, you know, Ohio State's going to be there. And first year of the West, Nebraska's going to win the West. I mean, there's no thoughts like that right now. I think that's what's really changed. If you go back to Bo's last team, boy, there's some talent on that team. And there were some football players, and not that they're on this one too, but a lot of them are transfers, and that's what changed. I'll tell you what changed is the portal. The portal has changed more than NIL, because I think the kids actually handle the money pretty well, but the portal has changed. So you don't really get to know some of the players the way that you used to. You know, they're there, they're gone, they're on to another school. In the case of Casey Thompson, guys just kind of come in and come out. I think the players have to adjust. It's really striking in college basketball, even more than college football, because there's fewer players on the roster. I think the transfer portal has changed things, and I'm pretty steadfast on this. They have to do something more about that. People have spent too much time wringing their hands over NIL and not enough time on the transfer portal. If you change the rules of the transfer portal, you will alter NIL. If the athletes don't get to move around with total freedom, then NIL will become more structured too. And for whatever reason, they haven't addressed the portal, because Congress doesn't care about the portal. No. They just care about the money. So, like, they need to address the transfer portal and make it a more structured environment. Whatever that looks like. In the first 2 years you're out of school, you don't get a free transfer, you know, or you have to be at a school for at least 2 years, and then you can transfer wherever you want. Like, you have to create a system that doesn't allow schools, notice what I said there, schools to push out guys that don't immediately get it. Because that's part of what's happening, is that programs are they're just cycling through players. They're like, well, we're going to bring this guy in kind of like as a free agent. and it doesn't work, and so let's go find him somewhere else to go and see ya. And I don't like that. I think that's a bad system, and I think you need to fix the transfer portal in a way that reduces the incentive to do that.
But can I play the kind of devil's advocate with you here? What do you do about that? So, yes, fix the transfer portal. I agree. Something needs to be done. But the old talking will never change is, well, coaches can move and come and go as they please. Why can't players? So how do you balance that talk?
You can build a rule set around that.
Like exceptions,
right? Like they have now, or like they used to.
I think you can. And I think you can build some frameworks that allow student athletes to move around a little bit. Currently, if you have a coaching change at any time during the calendar year, a student athlete has 30 days to go into the portal. And you know what? West Virginia basketball, I think 3 or 4 players went in. Right. But like Northwestern, how many have gone in so far? Not that many.
No, I was going to ask you about that. That it seems a little surprising, actually.
Like just timing of it. Like, where are they going to play this year if they leave now?
There's nowhere to. Everyone already has a roster.
Right. What I'm more concerned with, and what I see more frequently, is, and I'm not talking about Casey Thompson's transfer. That's different. If you're on the back, to me, what I see a lot of is team signs 27 players in a class, then they add 10 transfers. There's no way they can carry all those scholarships, even with NIL rules, and people misunderstand that stuff anyway. You have to be like a 4th or 5th year guy to get off the scout. And anyway, and you just see these players leave, and you're like, well, what Deion Sanders did. Deion Sanders ran players off. Like it wasn't like a, hey, I'm coming in and you guys can figure out what to do. Like there's no way all those players were just like, yeah, I don't want to play for this guy. Like it was, you're not going to play. You have to go now. And we're going to use the transfer portal as a means of telling you to go away. And I don't like that piece. Like you shouldn't be able to do that to a student athlete in the first 2 years of their time in school, and they shouldn't be able to leave. I think that would be what I would say. Is that like you got to give it 2 years, and then what you start to do is you the coaches are like, well, we got this guy for at least 2. And if we have him for 2, we might have him for 4. So we need to recruit more diligently. And this is especially true in basketball. We need to recruit in a way that we're not just bringing this guy here so he can fill out our practice roster for a year. And then if it doesn't work out, we can send him to, we can hook him up with UC Davis or, UC Santa Barbara or whatever, or Texas State. We'll get you another place, but you didn't work out for us, that kind of thing. And that's happened a lot in certain teams and sports, and I don't love that.
Sam, could you make the argument though that that type of rule would prevent certain guys from getting opportunities at higher levels of college athletics that they maybe wouldn't have gotten a shot if coaches knew, hey, we have to keep this guy for 2 years. We can't really afford to take a flyer on certain guys.
I don't know. I would be. I don't know. I'm not sure that it's possible that could happen. You certainly could have situations like that. But, in terms of rulemaking, I think you always have to balance competing interests against each other.
Sure.
And I think what I would say is that most coaches aren't that involved in NIL. They kind of are, but they kind of aren't. I think the thing that really vexes them is the portal. Like that, and you can say, and we are currently in a moment where coaches have money, coaches have power. We don't like people with money and power. So whatever they say, we have to be against. And I get it, but that also defies the internal logic of a team sport, which is teams are best comprised of people who are around each other for more than 9 months. Yeah. And so like team dynamics are better suited to teams that have cores for a period of time, and that's even true in professional sports. And so I think as it relates to college sports, even if we think the coaches have too much power and money, which I think they do, it doesn't mean they're necessarily wrong about the portal. And so if you ask me what's really changed, that's really changed. The portal has changed the sport more than NIL has. I think NIL has actually gone pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't. People are. I don't think there's probably as much money as people say, and I also think that the athletes have generally handled the money pretty well. Well, look at that. We can trust the 19 and 20-year-olds. You know, they didn't go out and fritter it away or stand for the wrong things or advertise with the wrong companies. For the most part, they've been really responsible. And so I don't think we need to freak out about NIL. I do think there needs to be a fix in the portal somehow, some way.
To the coaches part, and primarily in basketball, I think, like you said, is with the portal is it partly because the expectations are win now and you have to win right now and you can't build a program like, let's say, Matt Painter has at Purdue that is pretty dang comfortable and yes, takes transfers but doesn't need to, right? If he doesn't have to. Is that, do you think the expectation of fan/administration puts that pressure on coaches to win as soon as possible, which means, okay, we're going to just try and get the best portal kids we can?
I think each situation is a little different. I think in football, I don't really think that the heavy portal model has worked in many examples when measured against the failures. So Michigan State was successful, but look at what happened after that.
Yeah.
And now, let's be honest, Mel Tucker probably needs to have a winning season. I'm not sure he will.
Yeah.
And some of that, when you do that with the portal, it has cost. And I think it's going to have a cost with Nebraska this season that they leaned so much on portal players last year who are now gone. And so I think each situation's a little bit different. As it relates to Nebraska basketball, I think I have a lot of generosity towards the experience that Fred Hoiberg's had here, and fairness to that. I think the context in which he left the college sport to go to the NBA was very different than the context he returned to, because he was on the leading edge of the transfer portal movement when he left. And when he came back, everyone was doing it. And so part of what happened, I think, is some of the transfers just haven't been very good. And that's okay. That's life. But that's part of the challenge. Like, some of them just haven't been what was expected. And by that, I mean going all the way back to the first year when, they thought they had the best three-point shooter in the Big Ten. And that guy, I think he made like 32%. He didn't play any defense. And so he was a liability on the floor. And he was only here 1 year. So, like, I think part of what's happened there, and Hoiberg's tried very hard, I think, to try to right the ship. I think long term it's going to be very hard to build an NCAA tournament team with any consistency through the portal anymore. They're certainly going to try again this year. I do think Rick Mass is a good addition. It's just, I'm sure if he could do things over again, he might have put a few more high school kids in there. He might have tried to retain a few players that immediately left. And I'm talking the kid that went to Tulane, Kevin, I can't remember his last name. But, I don't think that guy was that bad of a basketball player. But the other thing I would say, and you maybe you agree with this or maybe you don't. So they added a kid yesterday who's 19. It's, great. And maybe he'll be a really, really good player. Is that kid going to be better next year than Eduardo Andre would have been as a senior, or Oleg would have been as a whatever he was going to be, a junior? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I'm not always sure what the thought, did Oleg just want to leave because he wanted to go to Wyoming so he could start? which I don't know if he'll start there. That kind of like you're just always kind of wondering, like, or even Ivan Udraga. Okay, so granted, he wasn't a good free throw shooter, but he had a Big Ten frame, and he just went to Grand Canyon, and he's still there, and I can't help but think he would have been a better number 3 post last year than Oleg would have. And so, like, there just seems to be this cycle within that program of let's sign a post, and he'll leave in 2 years, and like it's just and I just don't know that's the best way to try to handle managing a program. It's not what Creighton does, and Creighton's obviously a better program and had more success and had the advantage of the coach's son being an all-timer, which helps. But Creighton doesn't do that.
Well, if
and they're better.
If Nebraska wouldn't have just relied on one guy to do all their recruiting and handle all that, the situation probably might be a little bit different.
Might be.
And I feel strongly that if this staff that Nebraska men's basketball has in place right now was at the beginning of Hoiberg's tenure, they would be in a much better place. Which
it might be.
I still think they'll be okay. Before we get you out of here, I have to ask about Super 6 because you and I used to work together on it, and I know how difficult it is to put together, and you're never right? No matter what you do, you're never going to get the 6 correct. Everyone's going to disagree. But this year's really hard. It's got to be really hard to pick that 6, and it's a pretty special group of, I guess, 24 guys in the area. Even if you go to, I don't know, Logan Magnolia High School, and if you reach that far out, but in-state, just in-state in general, you have what, 12 power conference guys. So how do you decipher that? And I know it's coming out probably pretty soon here. So how's that process going right now?
August 20th is when it comes out. Grant Bricks won't be on it, and that's no knock on him. We dip into Iowa when A, we feel like there aren't enough players in Nebraska, and B, historically, and I've went through this, and I think you have too.
Right.
I would prefer if we go into Iowa that it's a high level player, and Grant Bricks is, but I don't know that I put him in the Max Duggan level of prominent in terms of being a quarterback and stuff like that. Anyway, Grant, if he was in Nebraska, would almost certainly be on it, but this year he is not going to be our Blaze Gunnerson. In-state, yes. So in-state it's really challenging. Certainly in the Metro alone, you have 6 players.
Right.
The way that we've always conceived it, and our former boss Thad always conceived, is you're trying to look for a combination of a high level prospect, but also somebody who's been really good in high school football. I'm sure people can imagine who might be on that, but to be very honest with you, it's been a lot of fun and challenging. I've got it written down on my board in my office, sort of the order, and it'll come out here on August 20th, and it will have names that you recognize, but there will definitely be a debate about whether we pick the right 6, because there are more than 6 who are worthy.
Yeah, I mean, you could easily. This year is probably one of the toughest ones, and I'm glad I'm not a part of it, because I don't want those emails like I got when we picked Max Duggan. I remember that, and I was like, okay, people.
Sam, we appreciate your time as always. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, take care.
Thanks, man.
That's Sam McKewon from Omaha World-Herald. More coffee and cream coming up next.